Hey, Ralph, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Yvonne. How about you?
I'm doing fantastic, and I can't tell you how excited I am to talk to our guest today.
Me too. He's one of our favorites, somebody that we have known for a long time, well-respected practitioner. I'm really, really excited about this.
So, today, guests, you're in for a treat. We have Mr. Jeff Adelson. He is a partner with Bober, Peterson, and Kobe, a law firm in Irvine, California. And Jeff is one of those rare individuals. I mean, I think we're both very lucky to know some really incredible people in this industry. But for me, Jeff is one of those folks. He's a defense attorney, that is his practice. But he often talks about ethics and empathy, and that is what we're going to talk about today. It is such a vast topic, Ralph.
It really is. It's an ocean, right? That we could just keep swimming and diving deeper. And the more you do that, the more water you discover. Because, like you said, it's a deep, deep topic.
It is, but we are scratching the surface today, talking about the importance of ethics and empathy in our so complex workers' compensation system. Are you ready?
I'm ready. Let's go do it.
Do it. Hi, Jeff.
Hey, how you guys?
We are good. How are you doing?
I'm great. Happy to see you again.
And you are joining us from where?
I'm joining you from Southern California, home of the Dodgers.
Home of the Dodgers. That's right. Have you been to a Dodgers game lately?
You mean like on TV?
No. Have you been to a Dodgers
You
game?
mean like have I watched them on TV? Oh yeah, I have. Have I waited in line to get out of the parking lot? No.
No. Okay. I'm kind of in the same boat. I don't enjoy going to see things that require you having to navigate big crowds. Not my cup of tea anymore.
No.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. We are excited to talk with you about one of our favorite topics, workers' compensation. So today we're happy to have you. So Jeff, give a brief introduction of who you are, what you do, and what firm you are with in the workers' compensation space.
Okay. I'm a partner in the firm of Bober, Peterson, and Kobe in Irvine, California, which is the southern part of the state. And I have been involved in work comp for a long time. I'm now in my 48th year as a lawyer in California. And a good amount of that has been for in the work comp field, as well as general counsel for a national firm for 20 years. So I've seen it from both sides as an employer and as a defense attorney, and I still find it fascinating.
We do too. So again, thank you for joining us. So as we like to say, you're tenured in your career. You've seen a lot of different angles, as has Rafael and myself. So today we want to focus our conversation on ethics and ethics and empathy, which are two important things to take into consideration in our industry. So where should we start? Why do we need to think about ethics in a system like workers' compensation? I mean, we have all these rules and regulations. Doesn't everybody follow the rules?
Really? I for the most part, yes. For the most part, I'm happy to say they do. And legal ethics are not as straightforward as you might think. In fact, I think it's very difficult when you get into part of it. I mean, certain things, of course, stand out to you, but then there are other issues that come up that arise, and those are things where it gets a little difficult. And of course, as attorneys, we're held to a different standard before the board. I mean, you would hope that the WCAB would apply the same standard of ethics to all of those who practice before the board in California, but that's not always the case. And we also are faced with the task of explaining ethics to our clients. And that sometimes, I mean, it's not a hard thing to do. I mean, you have to do that. But sometimes it's hard for somebody who isn't experienced, in litigation as a lawyer, to understand how this makes sense. So, the ethics rules are difficult. They're very easy to trip up on, but those are not necessarily the ones we see. The ones we see are those where perhaps our client is asking us to do something that we feel we should, well, I don't even want to say the word should. I'm going to use the word cannot do. And at that point, you have to take a position sometimes where you're prepared to lose a client. And my general counsel position over the years, we did that, more than a few times. And when we did do that, we generally did it with the advice of ethics counsel. There are attorneys, particularly here in California. I imagine the same in Florida, Rafael. But that's what they specialize in, and they spend their days helping lawyers or defending them before the state bar in proceedings. So, yeah, it's very, very important.
So give us an example. I know that you can't provide specifics, but give us an example of where you would need to talk to your client about a situation involving ethics.
I have in the past, pretty far back past, had a situation where in California, and again, those who are watching across the country, this may not apply to you. Your systems may be different. I speak solely for California here, where the client will say, well, we have several cases filed before the work comp board where we're not getting a response from the attorney who is representing the injured worker. And what we'd like to do is we'd like to send an offer directly to the injured worker without sending a copy to their attorney. And we'd like you to do it for us. And that's a hard no. And, we cannot communicate with a represented party we just can't communicate with them directly. So that was basically a situation where you're either going to do it or you're going to give back a significant amount of work. Just to make sure we were on the right track, we reviewed it with ethics counsel, and we gave the work back. We just said we're not doing it, and you just have to do that. I was also faced recently with a situation where the attorney on the other side, while I was at trial, starting day of trial, I had heard that this particular attorney, through no really wrongdoing, in other words, he didn't commit any terrible event that would happen, but through a clerical issue, because reporting the state bar is difficult as well, but through a clerical issue, he was not able to practice law at that moment until he cleared it up. Well, I'm an officer of the court, and he's not at that point, and he's not permitted to practice law, even though it was really probably nothing on him. But if we would have gone forward with the trial, everything could have been set aside. It'd be a complete waste of the court's time. So my obligation to the court was that I have to advise the judge that this attorney can't practice. It was embarrassing for this person, but again, you have to weigh in the balance what your obligation is to your own client and what your social obligation is to your opposing counsel, which is other than to be pleasant and professional and have candor, nothing. So, that's another situation. And then there are situations where a client may want you to bury some information. In other words, they'll say, well, we want you to settle this case. California allows for complete and full satisfaction of future medical and pretty much all issues. They want you to settle the case, but they want you to represent to the judge, for example, maybe it's denied, or set forth a fact pattern that makes the judge more favorable in terms of wanting to approve the settlement. And that is a hard no as well, because you can't misrepresent things to the judge. I'm not going to do that. So, you get in there and you start talking, you go, well, you say the client in a nice way, well, this is your fantasy, but this is not the reality of the situation. We're not going to misrepresent anything to the judge. I mean, most of us who went to law school, unless you're a complete psychopath, you found it very difficult. I found it difficult. I'm still to this day happy I did it, and I still this day don't ever want to lose my ability to do it. So it's important. It's our livelihood, and it's our duty. It's our obligation. It's what's expected of us.
Well, thank you for those examples. I want to kind of go back to the first one that you offered up, and you said that, for example, a client might ask you to, if the opposing counsel has not replied or you haven't heard from them in a while, just send the offer letter to the injured worker and not the opposing counsel. Tell us why that shouldn't be done. What's wrong with that scenario?
Well, you are not permitted when parties obtain counsel. That means any unauthorized communication with the represented party ceases. That's a means of hopefully separating some distance between the parties who are at odds with each other. It allows the attorney the freedom to represent their client unencumbered, whereas if I were to interfere, that would get in the way of the attorney-client relationship, and that's a sacred relationship between attorney and client. There's one of the most important relationships in American law. It allows the parties to defend the case. They don't have to worry about other people hearing, talking, or wondering what to do, that they can speak freely about their position on the case and come up with either the defense or the ability to pursue some other remedy in the case. So, that's sacred. That you don't mess with.
Thank you for clarifying. Ralph, did you want to go anywhere? I know that this, in our conversations that we've had over the years, and some this year, this does tend to be a touchy subject in terms of people not understanding when it's okay to communicate, when there's counsel. So do you have any more specific questions to ask Jeff?
Jeff, every profession, right? Every professional has a code or ethical obligation that's been, for the most part, in writing, right, disseminated to members of that particular professional world. Are there rules right now, regulations, professional codes of conduct for the different entities and the different parties that sort of we coexist with, right, that lawyers coexist with in a workers' compensation claim, that sometimes, come into conflict or come into some sort of, difference, if you will, right? So I can think of, certainly from an adjusting perspective, are there rules there that sometimes bump up against lawyer rules? Vocational rehabilitation providers, medical providers, are there professional rules out there for those other folks that bump up against, the lawyer ethical obligations that you're talking about?
I don't think they bump up against it. I think what I've seen is, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe Florida is one of the few states that have rules of conduct for adjusters. Now, I don't know too many others that do, if any others, but those are simply rules of conduct, guides. I don't know, you tell me, if there's any downside except maybe having difficulty with your job if you violate them. Is a court going to come after you? But as you know, being a lawyer, we have rules of ethics. Not only do we have rules of ethics, and we have local court rules, and we have a lot of things that we have to follow, and we have trust accounts to deal with, some of us. So our rules are written out, and our rules are enforced by law. Now, whether an ethical situation that, for example, an insurance company comes up with, or an insurance commissioner comes up with in a particular state, whether that has any teeth or not, I don't know. But I trust those people not to have anything that bumps up against each other. Now, here's the thing. there is a remedy for all of us, and it's called the courts. So what will happen is, for example, what I would tell the client we spoke about earlier, well, if the injured worker's attorney is not responding, and we know that once we make an offer, the injured worker's attorney has a duty just to advise their client. Just when I receive a demand, I have a duty to advise my client. Well, we're not going to get to that part really, because we're not going to really know whether they did or didn't necessarily. But we do know that if we're not getting the cooperation we need, if we're not getting the relief we need, if there is a legitimate issue, at least in California, I can file for a hearing and bring that to the judge. Now that gives me a lot of comfort, because regardless of the situation I face on a particular case, whether I have a good relationship with the other side or not, or whether someone's trying to bully me, or whether the injured worker's not cooperating, I have the ability to go in and get a hearing quickly. And likewise, the attorneys who represent the injured workers, who deal with the defense side, who, the applicant's attorneys aren't the only ones who don't do stuff. On the defense side, there's a lot of attorneys who don't do that. And so likewise, the applicant's attorney side, we call them applicants here, the people who represent the injured workers, they have the same ability to bring us into court for the same reasons, particularly if their client is not getting what they need. They can require, at least in California, an expedited hearing or a priority conference to try and get certain issues that impact the injured worker's life in a very negative way quickly resolved.
Thanks, Jeff.
So are there any other examples, Jeff, you could think of where you've had to, I know that you must have many examples, but what's something that pops into your mind when it comes to other types of things outside of like maybe structural, things that must be followed by a certain letter of the law because that's the way they're expected to do? What about when a client is just doing something that's not, that you don't agree with? Like what do you do in those cases, and how do you come to a determination of what to do?
Well, I mean, we all the attorneys, we have an attorney-client relationship with our clients. And as we all know, not every client agrees with us. They're well educated in their field. They have the same ability to analyze as we do. They understand the law a lot as well as we do. And there's going to be legitimate disagreements. So I expect that and I appreciate that. And so we have a candid conversation. One thing I do not do is get in a loop of emails that go back and forth over the course of the day, pointing fingers at each other. I would recommend that if you see that you're not communicating the way you would hope to communicate, that you get on the phone and call your client, discuss it with them. Truly, I mean, on the defense side, we're not really dealing with a lot of emotion. Hopefully we're not. But sometimes on the employer side, it sometimes comes out. And the idea is to tone that down, find a way to deal with it, and just explain to people, well, this is the law and this is a lawsuit, but these proceedings, they're really just filled with issues. They're a basket of issues that have to be dealt with, because work comp provides so many different benefits in so many different ways that things have to work together. And when they don't, your job is to be a problem solver. So figure out where it is, have a good conversation about why you're recommending this. Listen to your client. your client might not be an attorney. That doesn't mean your client doesn't have a lot to add. They have a lot to add. A study was done an ethical study was done for a book someone wrote for the ABA a few years ago. And they asked people, they said, well, on the defense side, not necessarily work comp, they said, wow, who do you think is better at negotiating? Who do you think gets a better negotiated settlement, the attorney or the claims professional? And the study showed it was the claims professional. And one of the reasons they gave for that went into the analysis was that attorneys' egos are a problem. So attorneys sometimes, let their egos get in the way and they forget whose problem they're trying to solve. And it's not theirs, and it's not their personal one. So
interesting. That's very interesting.
It is. So you take your client's position into it. It's your client's position. You want to do the best you can for them. And if you and your client reach a divide, sometimes it's not the right fit. Sometimes your client would be better off with another attorney. And we have to stand up and say, if you feel that way, yes, of course. And when that happens, from an ethical point of view, at least in California, the file belongs to the client. The file doesn't belong to the attorney.
Right. Is there anything else that one should be thinking about when it comes to an ethical approach to workers' comp?
Well, I think the most obvious one is the duty to have candor before the court. And you need to be honest with your opposition and the court. And you need to be honest with your client. That's what the whole system is supposed to be based on, is integrity and honesty and candor. For example, if an attorney makes a mistake, the attorney has to advise the client. If the attorney represents something to the court, the attorney has to be telling the truth. So you'll see this situation where, some attorney, when you're negotiating, will say, yeah, my client will take the money, and they know they won't, and they're just telling you that because they want a continuance. And that happens on both sides. Or they'll tell the judge something to get it off calendar, and that's not correct either. So, honesty and integrity. And everyone makes mistakes, and people misjudge, and people make mistakes. And the best relationships are those where, either to your opposition or to your client, you admit something happened and you move on. And even though it can be humiliating at times, it does build trust, and it is truly what you have to do.
Thank you, Jeff. I really appreciate your insights. And now let's kind of pivot. Let's talk about the interplay between ethics and empathy. How in the world does that work? I am often told by all of my friends, many of whom are attorneys, that I'm not looking at it from the right frame of mind. That anyway. I don't want to cede the conversation. Let's talk about empathy and ethics, and where do we go from there?
Okay. Well, I think when it comes to empathy, honesty, as we just discussed, is probably the big ticket. So when it comes to empathy, you're talking about something people have or they don't have. You're also talking about emotional intelligence, which I think supports the idea of empathy. At least I think that. So I usually start out, when I think about empathy, I'm not thinking about empathy really for too many people other than the injured worker in this scenario. So I'll start with this. As far as I know, no one wakes up in the morning saying, I want to be an injured worker. Nobody wakes up in the morning and says, gee, I'd like to have my thumb amputated. Gee, I'd like to fall off a ladder. I'd like to be electrocuted. Or maybe someone should rear-end me while I'm making a delivery. I could trip downstairs. Yeah, that's what I wake up thinking about. So whatever happens to that injured worker during that day, if that happens, it's a shock to them. It's just like if one of us were, walking and we fell, or someone caused an injury to us while we were driving. It's a shock to us. But the difference is we can kind of deal with that. We can get up from our fall. We can hopefully walk away from our car accident. We have different things. But let's say we're an injured worker and all of a sudden we have a serious injury at work and we're scared. What's the first thing you think of when you're perhaps a blue collar worker and you sustain a bad injury, and perhaps English is not your first language, and you're thrown into a system that's so complex, meaning work comp, so complex that even lawyers and judges and professionals can't agree exactly on what the laws always mean. So you don't know where to go. So what would your fear be? Your fear would be, well, am I going to get better? Am I going to be able to go back to work? Am I going to be able to feed myself or my family, depending on what my living situation is? And who's going to take care of me? What's going to happen to me? Can I pay my bills? So what is the injured worker told to do? They're told to say, well, call this number, get on the internet. Can you imagine how that person must feel if they're hurt? Maybe they're not entirely literate on computers. And even if they are, who knows what, look, we all have trouble. We had trouble getting on today. And I think we know what we're doing. So, I see the real fear. So then let's take it to the other side. So who is the person who is supposed to be helping the injured worker? Well, once upon a time, they were in an office. Now they might be at home and they still might be in an office. But they're somewhere. And the likelihood is they're safe. The likelihood is they have breakfast. And the likelihood is they know what to do. And they get a call from someone who's really, really scared. And at that point, if you're good at your job, your emotional intelligence is going to kick in. Because if you're asking the injured worker what happened and you're not patient with them, or you're throwing around the shorthand that we all use in workers' comp, this person's not going to know what TTD is and all this other stuff is. They're not going to know what a medical provider network is. Well, you got to go to the doctor at the MPN. Well, why don't you just speak a foreign language to me, because I don't know what the hell you're talking about. And not only that, I don't have the capacity at this moment to think about it as clearly as I would 2 days removed. But what I do have the ability to think about is I hurt, I'm bleeding, I don't know what I'm going to do the rest of my life now. And am I going to get fired? So you have to understand that when this person comes into your life, if you're a claims professional, that you have to open the door and greet them. So another thing I've noticed is I've spoken on this a lot of places. And when I first started doing it, there was less discussion about empathy in the workplace. So the first time I did it was for a group of 250 adjusters from all over the country for a particular employer. And I started off my session with, when you guys wake up in the morning and you go to work, who are you working for? Who do you work for? Person raises their hand. I work for the XYZ insurance company, or I work for this third-party administrator, or I work for my company, the XYZ manufacturer of stuff company. And I say, like, no. And they all look at me like, what do you mean, no? I go, no. You work for the injured worker. Who here thinks that your job and the person you're there to take care of every day is the injured worker? Oh, I got booed. Like really. We're a little more empathetic now, maybe. I don't know. but this is probably 10 years ago. So, oh, boo, what are you talking about? So I started talking to these people. And I said, well, you think all these people are fakes? You think all these people are fraudulent? Some of them are. You might have enough experience to tell, but a good portion are pretty obviously hurt. And I understand that this is what you do every day. And some of you have been doing it for 20 years, 30 years, and this is what you see every day. And it's another handoff, or it's another back sprain, or it's another broken bone, another fall down the stairs, another this or that. I've seen it all, right? But you haven't. So I thought about it quite a bit. And I took my emotional intelligence test in the book, right? First time I took it, I flunked. Second time I took it after a while, I finally, I think I got it. But anyway, it got me to thinking that when I've gone to movies, which I enjoy going to movies, and back when like movie theaters were crowded and people went and stuff and didn't cough on each other or eat dinner in a movie and drink, back in those days, you go see like maybe, I hate to say it, but a zombie movie, or some battle scene or a science fiction movie where, be it people, zombies, creatures of some sort, are just getting mowed down. And you're sitting there, you're eating your popcorn. Oh yeah, it's another zombie. Fine. Oh, look at that zombie. Yeah, great. Fine. That's all good. And no one says a word. Everyone's there eating their popcorn, having a good time. God forbid someone kills a dog or a horse in a movie. Holy crap. All you hear is, oh no. Okay, well, that's a really bad thing too. I hate to see a horse or a dog killed in a movie as much as everyone else. But the fact is, they're used to seeing zombies killed. They're used to seeing the guy in the war movie go and fall over, the guy fall off the horse, the guy fall out of the car. They're not used to seeing the dog. So you gotta be able to understand that even though you're familiar and even though you've been exposed to so many horrible accidents, that they're not all the same. And the reason they're not all the same is because each person who's suffering from that accident, and the word is they are suffering, and they're scared.
Well, I want to pause for a second here, Jeff, because thank you for providing that wonderful illustration. That I think what you're trying to say is that in some cases we become desensitized to what we're exposed to, right? So in workers' compensation, especially if you've been adjusting claims for 20 years plus, I can understand how that can, you can start to become jaded. So what is the answer? How does one keep themselves from becoming jaded when they've been doing that job for so long, so that they can have more empathy toward, and the other thing I want to point out, so that's first part of the question. The other part is that we've all seen the statistics that by and large, the majority of the fraud, as you said, it's not to say that it never happens with injured workers, it does, but that percentage is fairly small when you compare that to the amount of fraud that's happening from the employer side, right?
Well, I don't know. I can't say yes or no to that because I really don't know. But I do know, California, there's a lot of potential fraud. The cases I'm talking about are people who are, it's an open and obvious injury. There's a lot of what we call in California cumulative trauma injuries or continuous trauma claims, where it might be a post-termination claim, where had the person continued to work or it hadn't been so easy for them to file, they never would have filed. And that's a whole other story. For the purposes of what I want to address with you are the admitted injury cases. The fact is, the claims professional, regardless of it's an admitted injury or not, number one, they have a duty to investigate. All insurance policies require a duty to investigate. And so they have to do that. And until they investigate, they really shouldn't judge whether it's fraudulent or not. So I think the point is that it is is that you have to treat people professionally, regardless. And then you do your investigation, and then you defend the claim, or you provide benefits. But even cases where you're providing every benefit, if it's in litigation, particularly in California, there's going to be issues. There's a certain amount that you're willing to pay, and there's certain things that you're required to do, and certain things that go beyond what you're required to do, and you have to follow the law too. So maybe you want to help someone more than you are, but you can't, and you shouldn't, because you're going to follow what the law says.
Right. Well, it makes me think about another topic that we could do a whole other conversation about, and we could. But bias comes into play a lot, right? So you mentioned emotional intelligence earlier, and we've had sessions where we've talked about, bias and how that comes into play with decision making. But before we go off down that rabbit hole, we are getting the time where we need to wrap it up.
Okay.
Rafael always hates it when I say this, but Ralph, I want to hear from you some more. You haven't said much.
Oh, I'm loving this conversation. I really am, Jeff, because it applies to all of us, no matter what side you're on, no matter the small case, large case. The stuff that you're talking about is so significant, and it's so meaningful for each and every one of us, no matter your engagement or involvement in the system. Jeff, is empathy required? Does it rise to the level of, is it ethically required by all sides and all parties handling a claim? What do you think about that?
It's not ethically required. The law, there's emotion in everything, right? But the law doesn't require us to have emotion one way or the other. The law requires that we act honestly, with candor, professionally. That's what the law requires. Everybody's got a different style. Everybody's personality is different. That's why you can see two injured workers with the same injury, and one acts one way and one acts the other, because we are all different. I think empathy I think empathy would assist us in recognizing that there's a difference between all of us. My injury is important to me. Like my mother used to say, when someone had maybe she had surgery, minor surgery, and someone would say to my mother, well, it's a minor surgery. And my mother would say, well, in my mother's way, to everyone else, everyone's other surgery is minor except their own. So my mom I don't know what the translation of that is into Yiddish, but that's the English version. So that's where empathy is. You can't force it. You can't force people to like each other or good behavior or kindness, but you can enforce the rules that are set down for us, those of us who practice before the courts, and those of us who are professional in claims or risk management or underwriting or any of the things that we touch on.
Yvonne, you said it already, and it is a topic that maybe we can come and revisit with Jeff, but bias, right, comes into almost all of the different components that we're talking about here. And I know that it is a topic, right, that we have addressed before with, from different angles, from different components, but it certainly seems like it also, it's a component of this conversation that I would love to have a little more time and explore.
Well, we could have a whole, sorry, Jeff, we could have a whole conversation, the three of us, and I know the three of us could do this very well, because I know you both on a personal level, but everybody sees things, like Jeff said, everybody sees things differently. You could take 5 different people and they can all have the same experience, but they would each tell a different story about that experience, right? And that's where bias comes into play. Jeff, what were you going to say?
I was going to say, I haven't come across any bias on the insurance side or the TPA side. Where I have had to deal with it rather unpleasantly is on the employer side. And
interesting.
Interesting. I think when you get to the levels of insurance carriers and TPAs, the people who represent injured workers out there who might hear this are all gonna are gonna be booing. But I have found for the most part these companies, they want to do the right thing. They want to pay what they owe. I've never heard otherwise from any insurance or TPA client I've ever had, ever. There might be a rogue, employee in there somewhere, but that's not the framework, and that's not the company. They want to protect their brand as well. But the employers, yes, I have.
Interesting.
Yeah, that really is. That's a deep statement, and I'm trying to break that apart myself. Jeff, that's really meaningful. That's deep. That maybe that's another conversation altogether.
Sure.
Another show we can do.
One example I have, because it's very recent, because I just did a webinar on suicidality, and when this airs, it's going to be a little bit down the road from this. But the example that I grapple with probably most is that, a friend of mine who's a psychologist, Dr. Datz, has told me on a number of occasions that she has a person in her office that is considering suicide, and she will call a claims adjuster and ask for a referral, and the claims adjuster will tell her, the licensed psychologist, no, that person's exaggerating. They're not really feeling that way. And I think that's where I have an issue with, the bias and not having empathy towards the psychologist who is calling you for a referral for a person who's sitting in their office that may or may not be suicidal. So those are the kind of things.
Well, do you think that's bias, or you just think that's not caring?
In the context of the way it was told to me, I think it is biased, because the person was basically in the examples that she shared, the person would say things like, that person never said that to me. That person never said that to her provider. Why would they be saying that to you? And so I think that's a bias in, why would a person tell that to one person, not tell it to another?
Well, that I don't know. So I couldn't tell you if it is or isn't. But one thing I can tell you, those of us who are not doctors should admit we're not doctors.
Correct. Correct. I agree with that 100%. So Jeff, thank you. It's always so good to talk with you and spend time with you.
Well, thank you.
Let's wrap it up with something fun. All right. I already asked you if you've been to a professional sports game more recently. Tell us what you do for fun when you like to blow off steam and just kind of have a good time. What does that look like for you?
I was afraid you asked me that. No, no. I am a connoisseur of going down the YouTube rabbit hole. I wake up pretty early on the weekends and during the week. And one of the things I love to do when I wake up Saturday mornings is not get out of bed for 2 or 3 hours and turn on YouTube and take my trip. And sometimes it leads me to a lot of knowledge that no one cares about but me. And I spend the rest of the weekend boring those around me with what I learned on YouTube. Or
go ahead.
Or I'll decide that, I want to watch a Buddy Holly video from 1957. And there it is. It's the Wayback Machine. It's the best.
You and my husband would get along very well. And you do, actually. You've met him a couple times. So yeah, that is his thing too. Very good.
Now I know. I got to ask you every time I see you now. I'm going to ask you what you've been up to on YouTube.
Oh my God. It's like I'm walking around. Why didn't I know this sooner?
Right.
I found an island off of Newfoundland that's French. It's like to France what Hawaii is to us, but it's like just this tiny distance away from Canada.
Wow.
I go, I got to go there.
Well, it is amazing the amount of information you can find. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Well, listen, like I said, as always, it's great to talk with you and listen to you speak about, I know that you really enjoy talking about ethics and empathy, so I wish it could have been longer, but appreciate the time that we spent today. Thank you so much.
Thank you both. I really appreciate it. I love talking with you guys as well.
Thanks,
Thank
Jeff.
you. All right. Until next time, hasta luego.
Bye, guys.